Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Karen Rice. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to be painting an abstract watercolour, the House of Parliament and Big Ben, and I'm going to be using mostly a plastic card, just a cut up card with some watercolours and a couple of brushes. So why not join me on my journey? Here goes. So here are my materials. All of these materials will be listed in the description below, and any questions you have about them, please put them in the comments section. So here goes. I've got my plastic card here. It's an old AA card I've cut up into small pieces, and I'm literally just taking the paint from freshly squeezed tubed paint. I've wet my paper, and some of it's not wet all over. I've wet it in patches, so some bits I'm putting on the paint quite dry, as you can see, but other bits the paint will catch a little wet area and it'll bleed, so you'll get some happy accidents. I'm using a mixture of quinacridone gold and quinacridone rust from M. Graham Watercolours. And what's great about those is they actually stay wet in your palette for quite some time after you've used them. So I really like that aspect, so I don't have to kind of spray my paints a few hours before to reawaken them, as it were. And as you can see, I'm actually just painting in here the bridge, Westminster Bridge, which is the bridge that goes over to the House of Parliament in London. And I'm using the card really like a palette knife and just modelling the sort of the start of the buildings. When you're working like this, it's much more instinctive. And I mean, you're all probably looking at this and thinking it's so strange to use watercolour like this. But it's watercolour is such a versatile medium. You can do so many different techniques to it. And that's what I find so inspiring and so exciting about it. And I love painting these sort of semi-abstract paintings. I did find this bit a tricky bit, drawing circles with the plastic card, and in some ways probably not ideal, so I would probably advise use a brush for it. Actually, it's very difficult, and to do different shapes and things like that. I find it quite easy doing this sort of the House of Parliament, but Big Ben was a little bit trickier, and sometimes doing the width here, the card, you almost have to have different pieces of card with different widths so you don't go over the width, as it were, as you can see I've done with Big Ben here. I'll hide that of course later, but it's just a little tip for you, tip for myself really. So I've tilted my painting here, and I'm going to start spraying with my little spritzer bottle the paint which hasn't dried yet. You don't want to spray too quickly when the paint's very wet, because you'll just spray all your painting away and it'll be a bit of a mess. But because you're putting it on with the card and it's creamy paint, it's kind of sticky and quite dry anyway, so there's not that much of a danger of doing that. But you can see I'm using a household decorating brush here just to kind of get the paint moving. And the other thing that happens here as well, you get lovely colour mixing as well, and quite exciting accidental effects. So what I'm doing here now is I'm getting, obviously using the same thick creamy paint straight from the tube, and I'm painting damp into damp. Now, in a way, it's quite tricky because it does bleed everywhere now. Everything's really wet. But I love the exciting thing of this because I am sort of painting an abstract picture, obviously of the House of Parliament and Big Ben, but I'm not quite sure where it's going, and I love that kind of exciting aspect of it. You're going to get something really different, really exciting and really creative. So it might be an idea, if you find this stage tricky, just to wait for it to dry off a little bit more, or even give it a blow dry and then just start with dry paper again. So just to kind of, so it doesn't run like this. You know, it can be a little bit sort of unnerving when you're sort of putting on very creamy paint onto a very wet surface. What I'm doing now is I'm just sort of finishing off a little bits here, but I'm going to start lifting off the paint because the paint sort of, it's still damp, but it's drying off a little bit, and it enables you to actually lift off the paint. So you're creating light areas. So as you can see, of all those buildings in the distance on the left there, I've lifted off, and I'm just scraping off the top of the bridge here now, just a swift sort of stroke of the plastic card, and I've got some light on the top of the bridge, and I'm just taking off now some highlights on the House of Parliament there as well. It's quite exciting because you're kind of almost just lifting off this paint and creating all these wonderful textured light effects. This is another exciting thing you can do with the plastic card. As you can see here, I'm using the paint to print. So I've got some paint on the very edge of the card, and I'm just using that dark to print and to make solid lines with. And it's quite nice because it actually gives the detail of the architecture there and gives some fine lines, almost like an outline. So I'm just tilting it here, and I'm just scraping off with the card the water area, just to see lots of lovely light and movement in the water, which is quite exciting. I'm just using a little bit of Winsor & Newton white watercolour paint. It's not as opaque as gouache. I just lost a little bit of light in the clock face of Big Ben, and it's very hard to make a circle with the plastic card, so I've gone to the brush and I'm just putting in the light clock face. So now I've got the white paint out, I might as well use the plastic card and start putting some highlights on the buildings. And I love doing stuff like this because I know that once I'm doing this, I'm towards the end of the painting now, and there's always a worry with watercolour, you're going to overdo it. So by using this white paint, I know that I'm on the finishing line and there's no danger, hopefully, of me spoiling the picture. And we all go through that, you know, with watercolour, because it can end up being so muddy, even though it looks so exciting at one stage, and then suddenly you lose it. Unfortunately, it happens to us all. So I've slowed the video down again, and I am just putting in a few more little dark details just to finish off. I mean, I'm painting the House of Parliament. There's a lot of detail here. So I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. But every time I look, I kind of have to put more information in there. So I am just sort of putting in just those final details. As you can see here, I'm using my brush. I've used it to create the curves under the bridge and just a few more little details on the House of Parliament and on Big Ben, just to finish those off, and just tidying up the edges there, because obviously my card went over the edge and made Big Ben a little bit wider. So just putting a few more dots and eyes. I mean, really, someone should be telling me to stop right now, but clearly it's too late for me because I've already painted it and I'm doing a voiceover. But in some ways, I'd like to have stopped just before I put all these tiny details in. But never mind, I'm always learning, you see. So even when I'm watching and myself doing these videos, I'm learning so much about watercolour, and I'm being my own teacher, which is fabulous. Well, fortunately, I did manage to stop, and I've taken the tape off around the edge, which I always love to do, and I'm really pleased with it. Overall, really pleased with it. Big Ben's a little bit messy on the right-hand side, but that was the width of the plastic card. But I just love this technique. I forgot the most obvious thing, the time on Big Ben. So I'm just putting this in with my Apple twig, and it's 3 o'clock. I've put a mount round this picture now, and I always like to do that because it sort of gives you a really objective way of looking at your paintings. Yeah, and overall I'm really pleased. I hope you've enjoyed this video and the step-by-step process of painting an abstract painting. If you've got any questions about the materials or the techniques I've used, please put them in the comments section below and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. If you like this style of painting with a card in an abstract style, why don't you check out my other videos on my YouTube channel, and you'll find some other examples of this style of painting. I'll also put a link to this style of painting in the top right hand corner of this video. But if you want updates to my latest videos, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and you'll get notifications of my latest videos. Thanks again for watching, happy painting, and bye for now.